We know from our research that such empathic understanding with a person, not about him, is such an effective approach that it can bring about major changes in personality. Some of you may be feeling that you listen well to people and that you have never seen such results. The chances are very great indeed that your listening has not been of the type I have described. Fortunately, I can suggest a little laboratory experiment which you can try to test the quality of your understanding. Okay, so this is lovely, because you don't often actually get a technique from a therapist that actually works, you know. You get sort of vague techniques, like help the person lay the cards out on the table, you know. It's kind of at a high level of abstraction. But this exercise you can actually do, and you can do it a lot, and if you do it, it will teach you to listen. So, the next time you get into an argument with your wife or your friends, or with a small group of friends, stop the discussion for a moment and for an experiment institute this rule. Well, you also don't have to be that formal about it. You can just do it once you know the game. Each person can speak up for himself only after he has first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker accurately and to that speaker's satisfaction. Now that's so cool, because here's the typical argument. So we're arguing, I want to win, and so you tell me a bunch of things, and so then I take those things and I turn them into the stupidest possible representation of those things. You know, I weaken your argument and make you look like a fool, and then I destroy it. And that's a straw, that's by that, you're making your opponent into a straw man. That's the straw man argument, right? You take what they're telling you and you caricature it, and that way you can make them look absurd and make them be ashamed, and then, of course, you've set up this skinny little opponent that you can just demolish with one punch. It's really crooked, and it shows that you're a coward, because what it means is you have to have an opponent that's, you know, crippled and thin and starving and inarticulate before you could possibly win, before you could possibly progress. It's a pathetic way of having an argument. What you should do is listen to the person and help them make their argument as strong as you possibly can. And then deal with that. Because then you're sure that you're taking them seriously. So, and to that speaker's satisfaction. Well, that's so cool, eh? So we're having an argument. I don't know, maybe we have an argument about who's going to be responsible for grocery shopping or for doing the dishes or for cooking or any of those domestic things that continually cause couples to be at each other's throat. It's like, so you'll have some arguments about why you should do whatever it is that you're going to do. And in order for the argument to progress, I have to tell you back what you said. And you have to agree that I put it properly. Well, that's so annoying. Like, it just runs so contrary to what you want to do. Because, of course, you want to make the other person sound stupid so you can beat them. This way you can't do that, because you have to listen well enough so you actually understood what they said. And then you have to formulate their argument so that they're willing to agree that that actually constitutes their argument. Well, that's really, it's difficult. But it's so useful, because first of all, it does mean that you understood them. And second, it immediately indicates to them that you're not just trying to win. You're trying to listen. And then they're much less likely to get all irritable and angry at you, because at least you're trying to listen. You're not making them into a fool. And, you know, often when people are trying to tell you what they want, because they're all afraid of telling you what they want, because, you know, maybe they never got what they wanted in their whole life, you know, if they've had a history of bad relationships and poor parenting and that sort of thing. They're just bloody terrified to tell you that they might actually want something. And so, as soon as you indicate to them that you actually heard what they said, and you're willing to take it seriously enough to formulate it properly, well, then it's like one step towards trust. I see, you did listen. You at least know where I'm coming from. It's like, that doesn't mean you agree, you know. Just because you understand someone's argument doesn't mean you have to agree, but at least you know what the argument is. You see what this would mean. So one of the things Rogers does continually in his therapy, and I do this a lot, is like I listen to the person, and they kind of go through a narrative, a spontaneous narrative, often following a chain of associations, as Freud pointed out. They'll tell me a spontaneous narrative, and I'll say, okay, it sounds to me like this is what you said. And I'll try to, you know, lay out the argument. And maybe now and then I'll ask for clarification if there's a part I didn't understand, or if I see that there's a part that seems contradictory. You know, they said this thing here, this thing there, and I'll tell them that. You know, it seems to me that you said this here, and I'm not sure how to put those together. I don't say, well, that makes your argument, you know, incoherent. I say, well, I don't get how to understand that. And they kind of go, oh, yeah, because people will admit to that if you just point it out flatly, you know. It's like, I'm not involved, I'm just listening. It's not my problem, it's a problem. And that's another thing that's useful too. The other person is entitled to their suffering. You don't get to take it away, it's their destiny. So you can listen to their problems without having to think that, you know, you have to take them on as if they're yours. You have to mirror them, but it's their problem. It's like they have to figure it out, and that's good. You need a problem to figure out. It's not necessarily a terrible thing that they have a problem. It would simply mean that before presenting your own point of view, it would be necessary for you to really achieve the other speaker's frame of reference, to understand his thoughts and feelings so well that you could summarize them for him. And that's useful too, because, you know, the way we remember things is if you tell me a long story, and I tell it back to you. I do not tell it back to you. What happens is I listen to it, and I try to figure out what the thread of the argument is. And then when I tell it back to you, it's way shorter and tighter. And that means in some sense it's got all the essentials, but it's got less of the baggage. Right? That's what you're kind of doing when you ask someone to get to the point. So they tell you this long story. It's like this tree that it's full of dead branches and it hasn't been pruned, and there it's standing there, and you know maybe the living branches you can hardly even see, but you're concentrating on them, and then when you tell it back to them, you just tell them the part of the story that's alive, and they listen to that and they think, oh yes, that's what I meant, and then that means you've changed the memory, right? If they agree, you've changed the memory, you've divested it of all the excess baggage, just like pruning, and that's what you're doing, and so that dialogue it's mental hygiene. And that's what people do. You know, you've got to wonder, well, why do we talk? Well, it's to exchange information. Yeah, and there's utility in it. You know, like if you know how to do something and I don't, you can tell me. But that isn't the sort of thing that people are doing most of the time. Most of the time they're telling their stories. This is what happened to me. Right? And then the other person will say, well, this is what happened to me. And there's this mutual attempt to organize. That's how people are organizing their brains. We organize our brains by talking. And so if you don't have someone to listen to you, well, especially if it's over a few decades, you're going to have a brain that's like a whole forest of trees that needs a forest fire. It doesn't need just some, you know, trimming. It's really in trouble. So you need to have someone to listen to you. And the best way to get someone like that is to find a bunch of people and listen to them. Because, you know, of course, then that's a friendship. That's a real friendship, you know, because you're both trying to move towards a better place, whatever that place is. And it's a great relationship then.